The chaos unleashed Rome after Caesar's assassination. The Roman Senate chamber was eerily silent, save for the echo of hurried footsteps. Moments earlier, Julius Caesar's lifeless body lay crumpled at the base of Pompey's statue, his crimson blood pooling like a vivid reminder of the betrayal that had just occurred. The conspirators, who fancied themselves as liberators of the Republic, stood amidst the carnage, their daggers still glinting with Caesar's blood. They had slain a man, a dictator, a supposed tyrant, but the Republic they envisioned was far from restored. What they had truly unleashed was a tempest that would engulf Rome in chaos and transform its destiny forever. Rome in turmoil. As the conspirators fled the Senate, panic gripped the streets. Rumors spread like wildfire. Caesar was dead. Citizens poured into the Forum, their faces a mix of confusion and terror. The assassins, led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus, marched to the Capitoline Hill, proclaiming themselves as liberators of Rome. Their message was simple yet naive. They had saved the Republic from tyranny. But the masses were unmoved. Caesar had brought stability after years of civil war. His assassination felt like the return of chaos. In the aftermath, the vacuum of power became evident. Mark Antony, Caesar's trusted ally and co-consul, evaded immediate retaliation and barricaded himself in his home. Lepidus, another loyal Caesarian, mobilized his troops to secure the Tiber Island, readying for potential retaliation. The assassins were caught off guard. Instead of gratitude, they faced fear and hostility from the people. Rome, a city accustomed to upheaval, now stood on the brink of yet another civil war. The irony of freedom. Brutus and Cassius believed their actions would restore the Republic's glory. Yet their plan was riddled with contradictions. They had condemned Caesar's centralized power but relied on military force to maintain their position. Decimus Brutus stationed gladiators outside the Senate, a sight that frightened citizens rather than rallying them. When the conspirators sent heralds to announce Caesar's death, they were met not with applause but pleas for peace. The populace had grown weary of political instability. This reaction reveals much about Roman society at the time. Caesar, despite his autocratic tendencies, was a figure of stability. He had redistributed land, initiated public works, and quelled internal strife. For veterans and commoners alike, his rule represented hope. The conspirators' failure to anticipate this sentiment underscores their detachment from the populace. They were senators of privilege, out of touch with the fears of the Roman streets. Mark Antony's calculated move. Amid the chaos, Antony seized his moment. Initially, he adopted a conciliatory tone, proposing to negotiate with the assassins. Yet, behind closed doors, he plotted his ascent. Antony understood the power of public opinion and set out to sway it. He summoned the Senate and pushed for a compromise. The conspirators' lives would be spared, but Caesar's actions as dictator would be ratified. This move was not just pragmatic but strategic. By legitimizing Caesar's laws, Antony aligned himself with the dictator's legacy, positioning himself as the rightful successor. The turning point came at Caesar's funeral. Antony delivered a eulogy that would become legendary. Holding aloft Caesar's bloodied toga, he recounted the dictator's accomplishments, emphasizing his generosity, the gifts left for the people in his will. He revealed a wax effigy of Caesar's mutilated body, the 23 stab wounds symbolizing betrayal. The crowd, already simmering with grief, erupted in fury. They rioted, burning the Senate chamber and seeking vengeance against the conspirators. Antony had weaponized their emotions, cementing his role as Rome's de facto leader. The rise of Octavian. While Antony consolidated power, another figure emerged on the horizon, Gaius Octavius, Caesar's great-nephew and adopted son. At just 19 years old, Octavian's rise was improbable. When he received news of his adoption, he was in Illyria undergoing military training. His advisors urged caution, suggesting he renounce the inheritance and live quietly. But Octavian had other plans. Upon arriving in Brundisium, Octavian was greeted by throngs of Caesar's veterans who hailed him as Caesar's heir. Despite his youth, he demonstrated remarkable political acumen. He adopted Caesar's name and began distributing the wealth promised in Caesar's will. This act endeared him to the masses, setting the stage for a confrontation with Antony. A nation divided, Rome teetered on the edge of collapse. The Senate was fractured, with some siding with Antony, others with Octavian, and a few holding out hope for Brutus and Cassius. The conspirators, realizing their position in Rome was untenable, retreated to their provincial strongholds, where they began amassing armies. Meanwhile, Antony and Octavian circled each other warily, their alliance tenuous at best. The power struggle was not just a clash of personalities but of visions for Rome's future. Antony sought to continue Caesar's legacy through consolidation of power, albeit under his control. Octavian, on the other hand, played the role of the youthful avenger, restoring Caesar's honor while subtly building his own base of power. Brutus and Cassius, though initially united, began to diverge in their strategies, further weakening their cause. A tense calm before the storm. The first chapter of Rome's post-Caesar saga ends with a tense calm. The conspirators fortified their positions. Antony tightened his grip on the Senate, and Octavian maneuvered himself into the hearts of the people. Yet, the seeds of civil war had been sown. All sides were arming themselves, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Who would emerge victorious in the struggle for Rome's soul? Antony, with his charisma and military might? Octavian, the untested yet shrewd heir? Or the conspirators, clinging to their vision of a restored republic? History would soon provide the answer, but not before Rome endured another devastating chapter of civil war. The balance of power, Antony and Octavian's struggle for Rome, Caesar's legacy and the public's mourning. The Forum Romanum was packed with citizens, their faces etched with grief and confusion. Just days after Julius Caesar's assassination, Rome's political elite were scrambling to control a city on the brink of chaos. Antony's cunning manipulation of Caesar's legacy began to show its strength. The reading of Caesar's will, a document that declared Gaius Octavius as his adopted heir, was a pivotal moment that stirred emotions and sowed the seeds of future conflict. Caesar's generous gifts to the public, including his private gardens and a sum of 75 drachmae to every Roman citizen, ensured that his death would not diminish his popularity among the masses. Mark Antony's masterstroke was Caesar's funeral oration. Standing before the gathered crowd, Antony presented himself as a grieving ally and protector of Caesar's legacy. He dramatically revealed Caesar's bloody toga and the wax effigy displaying his 23 stab wounds, each a symbol of treachery and betrayal. Antony's words stoked the flames of public anger. What had started as mourning transformed into a full-blown riot, with the mob hunting the conspirators and setting parts of the city ablaze. Antony's calculated move elevated him as a champion of Caesar's vision, yet his ambitions stretched far beyond safeguarding a legacy. Octavian's calculated entry into politics. While Antony basked in his newfound influence, Gaius Octavius, now Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, was making his way to Rome. At just 19 years old, Octavian's journey from a relatively obscure figure to a key player in Roman politics was nothing short of extraordinary. Unlike Antony's overt displays of power, Octavian's approach was more measured, relying on shrewd alliances and a deep understanding of Roman society. Octavian's decision to embrace his adoption by Caesar was bold. It granted him not only a name synonymous with power but also a claim to the immense wealth and influence that Caesar left behind. Upon arriving in Italy, Octavian began mobilizing Caesar's veterans, who saw in him a continuation of their beloved leader. His youth, far from being a disadvantage, became a symbol of renewal and hope for those disillusioned by Antony's opportunism. Antony versus Octavian, the battle for Caesar's inheritance. The rivalry between Antony and Octavian quickly escalated. At the heart of their conflict lay Caesar's inheritance, both his wealth and his political legacy. Antony, as Caesar's closest ally, saw himself as the natural successor. He controlled the Senate and held command over key legions stationed in Rome. Octavian, however, had something Antony underestimated: the loyalty of the people and Caesar's veterans. Antony's refusal to hand over Caesar's fortune to Octavian only fueled tensions. Octavian responded by selling his personal assets to fulfill Caesar's promises to the people, including the 75 drachmae payout. This act, though financially burdensome, solidified Octavian's position as the true heir in the eyes of the public. The city's plebeians began to rally behind him, and Antony's grip on power started to weaken. The Senate's role and Cicero's gambit. Amid this brewing conflict, the Senate became a battlefield of its own. Many senators, disillusioned by Antony's increasingly authoritarian behavior, sought an alternative. Enter Marcus Tullius Cicero, the famed orator and statesman. Cicero had long opposed Caesar's concentration of power, but Antony's actions convinced him that a greater threat loomed. Cicero saw Octavian as a useful counterbalance to Antony. Though wary of Octavian's ambitions, Cicero believed he could guide the young heir to restore the Republic's values. In a series of speeches known as the Philippics, Cicero lambasted Antony, portraying him as a tyrant in the making. These speeches were as much a call to action as they were a gamble. By aligning with Octavian, Cicero hoped to preserve the Senate's relevance in an increasingly militarized political landscape. The conspirators in retreat. Meanwhile, Brutus and Cassius, the leaders of Caesar's assassination plot, had retreated to their provincial governorships. From these strongholds, they began amassing armies to prepare for the inevitable showdown. Their hopes of restoring the Republic now rested on their ability to outmaneuver Antony and Octavian. However, their position was far from secure. The public's hostility toward the conspirators, fueled by Antony's oration and Octavian's growing influence, left them politically isolated. In an attempt to regain favor, Brutus and Cassius proposed reforms aimed at addressing the grievances of Caesar's veterans and the plebeian class. Yet their efforts were too little, too late. The conspirators' inability to connect with the broader population, coupled with their reliance on military force, only deepened their isolation. The Second Triumvirate, a fragile alliance. The escalating tensions between Antony, Octavian, and the Senate culminated in the formation of the Second Triumvirate. This uneasy alliance between Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus was formalized through the Lex Titia in 43 BCE. Ostensibly created to stabilize Rome, the triumvirate was, in reality, a power-sharing arrangement fraught with internal rivalries. One of the triumvirate's first acts was the proscription of their political enemies. Cicero, despite his earlier alliance with Octavian, became a target. Antony's enmity toward Cicero sealed the orator's fate. His death marked the end of an era for the Senate and a grim reminder of the triumvirate's ruthlessness. The road to Philippi. With their domestic enemies subdued, the triumvirs turned their attention to Brutus and Cassius. The decisive confrontation came in 42 BCE at the Battle of Philippi. Antony and Octavian's combined forces clashed with the armies of the conspirators in a brutal two-part battle. Despite initial successes, Brutus and Cassius ultimately succumbed to the superior numbers and strategy of the triumvirs. Both men took their own lives, marking the end of the Republican resistance. A shifting power dynamic. The defeat of Brutus and Cassius left Antony and Octavian as the dominant forces in Roman politics. However, their alliance was tenuous at best. The division of the Roman territories, with Antony taking the east, Octavian the west, and Lepidus relegated to a marginal role in Africa, set the stage for future conflicts. Antony's relationship with Cleopatra VII of Egypt further strained his ties with Octavian. The union, seen by many Romans as a betrayal of Roman values, provided Octavian with the propaganda needed to turn public opinion against Antony. This growing rift would eventually lead to one of the most famous conflicts in Roman history, the Battle of Actium. The struggle deepens, civil war and the fragmentation of Rome. Prelude to war. The cracks in the alliance. By 41 BCE, the fragile unity of the Second Triumvirate, comprising Mark Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus, was beginning to show signs of strain. Though their initial collaboration had effectively crushed the remnants of the Republican cause at the Battle of Philippi, The triumvirs' mutual mistrust and conflicting ambitions were impossible to ignore. This period of tension, marked by political maneuvering and military posturing, would lead to one of the most dramatic chapters in Roman history, a bitter civil war that would permanently alter the Republic's fate. Antony's increasing presence in the East, particularly his alliance with Cleopatra VII of Egypt, became a focal point of controversy. Octavian, stationed in Rome, leveraged Antony's perceived excesses, lavish displays of wealth, rumors of Eastern decadence, and a growing estrangement from traditional Roman values to bolster his position as the Republic's defender. Lepidus, relegated to a minor role in Africa, struggled to assert influence as the two dominant triumvirs jockeyed for supremacy. The siege of Perugia, a conflict ignites. The simmering tensions boiled over with the Pelusine War, 41 to 40 BCE, a conflict that underscored the deep divisions within Rome. Lucius Antonius, Mark Antony's brother, and Fulvia, Antony's wife, sought to challenge Octavian's authority in Italy. Claiming to act in defense of Antony's interests, they rallied forces in the city of Perugia, modern Perugia, hoping to provoke a broader rebellion among Italy's cities. Octavian's response was swift and decisive. With his control of the western provinces and the loyalty of Caesar's veterans, he besieged Perugia. The campaign was as much a psychological battle as a military one, with Octavian employing propaganda to paint Lucius and Fulvia as traitors to Rome's stability. After months of deprivation, Perugia surrendered in early 40 BCE. While Lucius was spared, Fulvia's death shortly thereafter effectively neutralized Antony's allies in Italy. The fallout from the Pelusine War highlighted Octavian's ruthlessness and political acumen. By sparing Lucius, he avoided alienating Antony's broader support base while consolidating his own power. This victory marked a turning point, positioning Octavian as the uncontested master of Rome's western territories. Antony's Eastern Gambit, Cleopatra and the Parthian Campaign. While Octavian solidified his hold on the west, Antony turned his attention to the east, where he sought to emulate Caesar's military successes. His alliance with Cleopatra VII of Egypt was both a strategic and personal union. Cleopatra's wealth provided Antony with the resources to fund his campaigns, while their relationship symbolized a fusion of Roman ambition and Eastern opulence. Antony's campaign against Parthia in 36 BCE, however, proved disastrous. Despite initial successes, logistical challenges and harsh weather conditions forced his retreat. The failure weakened his credibility and emboldened Octavian, who seized upon Antony's setbacks to further his propaganda campaign. Antony's association with Cleopatra was reframed not as a strategic alliance but as a betrayal of Roman traditions, with Octavian accusing him of prioritizing Egypt over Rome. The role of propaganda, Octavian's calculated campaign. Octavian's ability to manipulate public opinion was unparalleled. Through a series of political and cultural initiatives, he painted Antony as a man seduced by foreign luxuries and disloyal to Rome. The publication of Antony's will, orchestrated by Octavian, was a masterstroke. In the document, Antony's wish to be buried alongside Cleopatra in Alexandria was portrayed as evidence of his allegiance to Egypt rather than Rome. This revelation shocked the Roman populace and further eroded Antony's standing. The propaganda war extended to the arts and public works. Octavian commissioned poets like Virgil and Horace to extol Roman virtues and celebrate his leadership. Simultaneously, he initiated public projects that demonstrated his commitment to the city's prosperity. By contrast, Antony's absence from Rome and perceived indulgences in the East solidified his image as an outsider. The triumvirate unravels. Lepidus's removal from the triumvirate in 36 BCE marked the beginning of its dissolution. After a failed attempt to seize control of Sicily during Octavian's campaign against Sextus Pompey, Lepidus was sidelined and exiled. His political irrelevance left Octavian and Antony as the sole contenders for power. The final split came in 32 BCE, when Octavian formally declared war, not on Antony, but on Cleopatra. By framing the conflict as a defense of Rome against foreign influence, Octavian avoided the appearance of a civil war while rallying support from the Senate and the populace. Antony's forces, bolstered by Cleopatra's Egyptian fleet, prepared for a confrontation that would determine the future of Rome. The Battle of Actium, a decisive moment. The climactic Battle of Actium in 31 BCE was a naval engagement that pitted Octavian's fleet, commanded by Agrippa, against the combined forces of Antony and Cleopatra. Fought off the coast of Greece, the battle was as much a test of strategy as it was of resolve. Octavian's disciplined forces and superior tactics ultimately prevailed, forcing Antony and Cleopatra to retreat to Egypt. The aftermath of Actium was both tragic and transformative. Antony and Cleopatra's suicides in 30 BCE marked the end of an era. Egypt was annexed as a Roman province, and Octavian returned to Rome as its unchallenged ruler. The Republic, in name only, had given way to an imperial structure with Octavian, soon to be Augustus, at its helm. The lessons of civil war. The post-Caesar era of Roman history offers profound lessons about the interplay of ambition, propaganda, and power. Antony and Octavian's rivalry was not merely a clash of personalities, but a reflection of deeper societal shifts. Antony represented the old guard, a world where individual commanders wielded immense power in distant provinces. Octavian, by contrast, symbolized a new vision for Rome's future, one that emphasized centralized authority and unity under a single leader. The events of this period also highlight the enduring impact of propaganda in shaping public opinion and legitimizing authority. Octavian's ability to craft a narrative that resonated with the Roman populace ensured his victory not just on the battlefield but in the court of public opinion. His transformation into Augustus marked the culmination of this journey, setting the stage for the Roman Empire's golden age. The dawn of an empire, Augustus and the New Rome. A sole survivor, Octavian's ascension. As the dust settled from the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, the world's eyes turned to Octavian, the last man standing in Rome's bloody power struggle. Antony and Cleopatra, once symbols of power and ambition, were no more. Their tragic deaths in Alexandria marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and Egypt's absorption into the Roman fold as a province. But for Rome, the end of the civil wars brought a question that had lingered since Caesar's assassination. What form would Rome's governance take? Octavian understood the precariousness of his position. While he had emerged victorious, memories of Caesar's fall loomed large. The Roman populace had shown their capacity to revolt against perceived tyranny, and the Senate remained wary of unchecked authority. To consolidate his power, Octavian embarked on one of history's most ingenious political reinventions, transforming himself from a military conqueror to Rome's first emperor. The founding of the Principate. Octavian's political genius lay in his ability to wield absolute power while maintaining the illusion of republican governance. In 27 BCE, he staged a public renunciation of his extraordinary powers before the Senate, ostensibly restoring the Republic. The Senate, either out of gratitude or fear, responded by granting him unprecedented honors, including the title of Augustus, meaning the revered one. This act formalized his authority while placating traditionalists who still clung to the ideals of the Republic. Under the guise of the Principate, Augustus maintained control over the military, the treasury, and the provinces. By carefully balancing autocracy with republican traditions, he avoided the fate of Caesar, whose overt dictatorship had provoked his assassination. Augustus' rule represented a delicate equilibrium, a centralized monarchy cloaked in the trappings of a republic. Building the empire, reforms and prosperity. Augustus' domestic policies were as transformative as his political maneuvers. Recognizing that stability required more than military might, he initiated a series of reforms that reshaped Roman society and governance. His policies included: 1. Administrative reforms. Augustus reorganized provincial governance, reducing corruption and ensuring efficient tax collection. By appointing loyal governors and instituting regular audits, he strengthened Rome's control over its vast territories. 2. Economic revitalization. Aware of the economic toll of decades of civil war, Augustus promoted trade, improved infrastructure, and stabilized the currency. His investments in roads, ports, and aqueducts facilitated commerce and connectivity across the empire. 3. Cultural revival. Augustus positioned himself as the patron of a cultural renaissance, commissioning grand architectural projects and supporting poets like Virgil, Horace, and Ovid. The Aeneid, Virgil's epic poem, celebrated Rome's divine destiny and Augustus' role in its fulfillment. 4. Military reforms. Augustus reduced the size of the legions and established a standing army funded by the state. He also created the Praetorian Guard, an elite unit tasked with protecting the emperor, ensuring loyalty within the ranks. These reforms ushered in a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity, known as the Pax Romana, Roman peace. For the first time in centuries, Rome's citizens and provinces enjoyed stability, security, and economic growth. The legacy of Cleopatra and Egypt. The annexation of Egypt under Augustus' reign had far-reaching consequences. As Rome's breadbasket, Egypt's fertile lands provided a steady supply of grain, alleviating food shortages and securing Rome's dominance in the Mediterranean. Yet, Cleopatra's legacy as the last pharaoh lingered in Roman imagination. Augustus was acutely aware of Cleopatra's symbolic power. To consolidate his own narrative, he framed her as the embodiment of Eastern decadence and a cautionary tale of hubris, contrasting it with his disciplined Roman virtues. Augustus' triumph over Cleopatra was immortalized in Roman art, literature, and coinage, reinforcing his position as Rome's savior. This propaganda not only justified his actions but also unified Rome under a common identity that celebrated its superiority over foreign powers. The challenge of succession. Despite his successes, Augustus faced a dilemma that had plagued Roman rulers before him: the issue of succession. Lacking a clear heir, he carefully groomed potential successors, including his stepsons Tiberius and Drusus. Augustus' approach to succession was methodical, emphasizing continuity and stability over personal preference. Tiberius ultimately emerged as Augustus' successor, but the process revealed the inherent challenges of dynastic rule in a system that still nominally upheld republican ideals. The transition of power from Augustus to Tiberius in 14 CE marked the first peaceful transfer of power in Roman imperial history, setting a precedent for future emperors. Reflections on Augustus' reign. Augustus' legacy is one of both achievement and complexity. His reign marked the end of the Republic and the birth of the Empire, a transformation that ensured Rome's dominance for centuries. Yet, his methods, the manipulation of republican traditions, the use of propaganda, and the centralization of power, raise enduring questions about the balance between authority and liberty. Historians have debated whether Augustus' reign represented the culmination of Caesar's vision or a betrayal of the Republic's ideals. What is undeniable, however, is his impact on the Roman world. Through his reforms, Augustus laid the foundation for an empire that would shape the course of Western civilization.